All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the most consequential, yet surprisingly brief, papacies in early church history. We are talking about Pope Agatho. Now, this is a man whose time as the Bishop of Rome lasted a mere 2.5 years, but his impact on theological history, and honestly on the very institution of the papacy itself, is literally still felt today. It is an absolutely incredible story of endurance, high-stakes diplomacy, and the sheer power of written tradition.
So, picture this. Church records actually state that Pope Agatho died at the staggering age of 103 or 104 years old. If we take these records at face value, that makes him the longest-lived pope to ever hold the office. I mean, just imagine taking on the immense, crushing pressure of leading a deeply fractured, empire-spanning institution at an age when most people are, 3 or 4 decades into their retirement? It's pretty wild.
Now, to be completely fair here, there is a bit of modern historical dispute about that number. Some recent research suggests there might have actually been a clerical mix-up in the records, with a similarly named monk, a guy named Agathon. But, regardless of the exact math, the enduring legend of the centenarian pope perfectly sets the stage for what we're looking at today. It introduces a figure of just incredible endurance and seemingly miraculous vigor.
So here is our agenda for this explainer. 1. The centenarian pope. 2. The Monothelite controversy. 3. The Council of Constantinople. 4. Two natures, two wills. And 5. The seeds of infallibility.
Starting off with Section 1, the centenarian pope, from Sicily to Rome.
Agatho's journey is such a fascinating slice of early medieval history. He was born a Greek in Palermo, Sicily, way back around the year 577. He was orphaned young and decided to join a monastery, and for decades he just lived a quiet monastic life. But the world was changing rapidly. Because of the Rashidun Caliphate's raids on Sicily that started in 652, Agatho, along with a lot of other Sicilian clergy, had to flee to Rome. There, he served for years as the church treasurer, and then, astonishingly, on a Sunday in June 678, this elderly monk and treasurer was suddenly elected pope.
And you'd think he might take it easy, right? Absolutely not. Despite his age, Agatho was an incredibly sharp administrator. He decisively stepped in to settle Bishop Wilfrid of York's messy diocese dispute, and he adeptly negotiated with the Byzantine emperor to abolish the hefty tax popes had to pay upon consecration. Simply put, this was a man who got things done.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Monothelite controversy and a divided empire.
So what was the big crisis? For decades, the church had been bitterly fighting over monothelitism. That was the 7th century belief that, while Jesus Christ had two natures, human and divine, he only had a single will. Now, I know that might sound like a super obscure, arcane debate to us today, but back then, this was an empire-splitting controversy. It was so pervasive it had even been tolerated by previous popes, most notably Pope Honorius I, and that caused a massive, lingering schism between East and West.
It basically boiled down to this one clear dividing line. On one side, you have monothelitism, the idea of a single will. On the other side, you have diothelitism, which means two wills, championed by Agatho and the Western Church. The core question was, did Christ have just one divine will that completely overrode his human psychology, or did he have both a human and a divine will that operated perfectly alongside each other? That was the ultimate puzzle they had to solve.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Council of Constantinople, the Sixth Ecumenical Council.
The timing for a resolution was finally right. The Muslim siege of Constantinople had just ended, and Emperor Constantine IV desperately wanted to heal the internal religious schism separating his empire. He reaches out, offering an olive branch to Rome, and Agatho quickly seizes the opportunity. By convening the Third Council of Constantinople in 680 AD, Agatho and the emperor were consciously stepping into a massive, highly authoritative tradition. We're talking Nicaea, Ephesus, Chalcedon. Agatho fully understood the weight of the moment. But before engaging the East, Agatho meticulously prepared. He didn't just send a quick reply back to the emperor. He actually ordered local councils to be held throughout the West, and he convened a major synod of 125 bishops in Rome around Easter in 680. He made absolutely sure that the universal tradition of the Western Church was completely unified. Only then did he draft a definitive profession of faith and send a large delegation over to the imperial palace, arriving in the fall of 680.
All right, Section 4. Two natures, two wills, and resolving the crisis.
When the papal legates finally arrived, they didn't just show up to argue.
They presented Agatho's absolute masterclass of a theological argument to Patriarch George and the gathered bishops. The argument flawlessly threaded the needle. Agatho basically said, of course Christ had a human will. He was fully human. But his human will followed and wasn't resisting or struggling against God. Rather, it was entirely subject to the divine will. He preserved the perfection of both natures without mixing them up.
And the result? A resounding, undeniable triumph for Agatho's theology. While Patriarch Macarius of Antioch did refuse to agree and got himself deposed, the vast majority of the bishops completely accepted Agatho's letter. The council formally proclaimed two wills and condemned Monothelitism once and for all. In a pretty staggering move of housecleaning, they even posthumously condemned former Pope Honorius I for tolerating the heresy in the first place. The schism was officially healed. Although, in a truly poignant twist of fate, Agatho actually died in January 681, months before the council even finished, and the good news could reach him back in Rome.
Finally, Section 5, the seeds of infallibility and the legacy of Pope Agatho.
Because beyond just healing the schism, Agatho's letters to that council contain something even more revolutionary for the future of the Catholic Church. He argued forcefully for the unblemished truth of the Apostolic See. He wasn't just saying, hey, I'm right about this one specific issue. He argued that the Church of Rome itself has never turned aside from the way of truth to any part of error. That is a massive, incredibly bold institutional claim.
And how does he justify that? By invoking Scripture. He quotes the divine promise made to Peter that his faith should not fail. Agatho was basically claiming that the office of the papacy was protected by a divine bulletproof shield. He was telling the Byzantine emperor and the Eastern bishops that the Roman pontiffs, strictly as successors of Peter, possessed a unique and unfailing authority.
So, why does all this matter for us today? Well, the Council Fathers over in Constantinople actually heard these magnificent, towering claims about Rome, and they largely accepted them. Even though they still claim the right to review the specific decrees, which we know because they condemned Honorius, their broad acceptance of Agatho's letters laid the undeniable theological groundwork for the concept of papal infallibility. It planted the very seed that would eventually be formally defined by the First Vatican Council, literally more than a millennium later.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. And it leaves us with a truly provocative thought to chew on. How did one incredibly elderly man, a former monk from Sicily, manage to wield enough institutional authority in just 2.5 years to reshape the theology of an entire empire, without ever even leaving Rome? Relying completely on the sheer power of written tradition and administrative focus, Pope Agatho healed a massive schism and cemented the authority of his office forever. It is an astonishing testament to the power of a single, well-crafted argument delivered at the exact right moment in history. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I'll catch you in the next one.